asking the questions. I feel like I should be on a brown sofa and listening to what I need to answer. So it's all good.
Let's see. So we are live on Facebook, I believe.
It says live for 20 seconds now.
Hey, we're big time around here. Big and official. Yep. Stream's working.
Hey, honey, do we have any derby pictures we can hang behind me here?
So, since we
usually you got people out in their shop. Yeah.
So now that we're live, so we'll just go back to it. So, how did you get into derbying? That's a really cool story.
Back in 1972, I was into a TV cartoon called Speed Racer, and I would always get up early in the morning to watch that show. It came on like at 7 o'clock every morning, and I lived in a little town called Bishop, California, and it was their local fair days, and somebody was building a demolition derby car down around the corner. And my grandmother came over to the house and says, "Hey, do you want to go see a derby car or a race car?" And I said, being a race car fan, I'm like, sure. I was 3 years old and almost 4. And she took me over to see this race car, and it was so cool. It was all painted up like an American flag. Oh, she's putting a derby picture behind, so we feel like we're in a derby city. This is good. Thank you, dear. And I liked it so much. She took me to see this race car, or derby car, every day. And the owner of the car came out and said, "Are you going to the derby?" And I'm like, "Please, let's go." And they took me to the demolition derby. And when I went in, not knowing and it had no idea about it. They said the flag dropped and the car started hitting, and they said my jaw dropped. And I would not turn my head. I just absolutely fell in love with derbies in 1972, watching a derby in Bishop, California. And it's been a passion, Santa Claus, I liked Santa Claus, but when I was growing up, if I did something wrong, it wasn't, "Hey, Santa's not going to come visit you." It's, if you're not a good kid, you're not going to the derby this year. And that was my motivation, to get an Eagle Scout. My mom and dad said, "You need to get an Eagle Scout before you can drive into derby because you can't have a driver's license." And so when I was that age, you had to be 16 to drive. And I had to have a driver's license. Well, to get a driver's license, I had to be an Eagle Scout. So I became an Eagle Scout before I was 16. And so everything was motivational around the derby for me.
So when you went to go watch your first ever derby, what kind of cars were they running back in the 70s? Were they running like 60s?
The car that was driving that I fell in love with was a 1963 Ford Thunderbird. But back then there was a lot of 50s, 60s. The 70s came around a little bit later, back when I was about 1977, 78. You started seeing some of the early, I have pictures of after the derby would happen. My grandmother would take me around the next day and we'd take pictures of all the old cars. And so I started seeing some 70s cars in about 78, 79. And then the last show I ever saw there was in 1980. And so it was all 60s models, a lot of no Imperials. I didn't see too many Imperials, a lot of Lincolns and old Buicks and some of the old Bubble 55 Buicks. And you saw those when I first started. So it was pretty cool.
So where was that at? Was that California?
Yeah, Bishop, California, up in the high Sierras. Yeah, they still have a derby to this day. I keep in track and follow it a little bit. I've never driven there. I've always said that when I retire, and when my last derby, which my wife says was 5 years ago, but when I retire, it would be cool to have that as my last show that I drive in, and have a car painted red, white, and blue like the first car I ever saw, and just say, "This is my grand boy. This is it." So we'll see how that plays out.
That's awesome. So what was your first car? What was your first Derby car?
1971 Chrysler Newport. Had my first car that I actually bought for it was a 67 Chrysler New Yorker that was flawless. I bought it. It took me 2 weeks to strip it out because I undid every nut meticulously because I wanted a cool paint job. And I got it all put together and then went to start it, and the timing chain was gone. And not knowing anything about mechanics, my neighbor said, "Oh, that car's junk." And so we scrapped it and didn't put a $30 timing chain in it. And we ended up buying a 71 Chrysler Newport and running that. And then after that, we ran for the first 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, all I would run is Chryslers. I thought that was the car. Until that infamous day that I was given, a lady in my church gave me a 1973, 74 Buick or Pontiac Grand Safari wagon. And I tried that and I'm like, oh, that was good. I liked that. And then I instantly jumped ship from the Chryslers and went full on GM.
So was your first wagon green too?
No, my first wagon was purple. I had it all painted with purple, and I always liked color and brightness. But when I was, let's say, when I went on, I'm LDS, and I went on a church mission. And when I came home from my church mission, I'm trying to think, it was before that. When was the first? No, it was before that. It was before my mission. I went to a professional, what we called a professional derby. My first show was a Boy Scout derby where 120 Boy Scouts built cars, and we went out and ran with all the scouts. And all of a sudden, the Boy Scouts stopped doing derbies the last year I drove. It was the last one they ever had. And I went to heard about a derby up in Camas, Utah, which if you saw Kings of Crash, the first episode was Camas, Utah. I went to that show when I was 16, 17. And I came home and I told my dad, I said, they're having a derby at the state fair. And he goes, you cannot drive a derby until a professional derby until you're 18. And the next day I showed up with a car and he goes, I didn't think that was going to work. And I went to this derby and I had a 71, 72 Polara that I took. And it was all painted up pink and purple and baby blue. And I painted a Gumby doll on the trunk of my car. And I went to the derby and all the people that I met all had nicknames. One was Rocket Ron, one was Sledgehammer, and everybody had unique derby names. And being a 16-year-old kid wanting to fit in, I'm like, I need a nickname. I said, I want a nickname. And to tell you, when I was 16, 17, I was a nerd. I was a real nerd. And I really just wanted a nickname. And so all these derby drivers came up to my car and they saw the Gumby doll in the back of the car and they said, we have a name for you. And I said, really, what is it? And they said, you're Gumby. And I go, I don't like it. I do not want that name. And so because I didn't like it so bad, they loved it. And so I started driving every show after that. And they would go up to the announcer and say, hey, when this kid comes into the arena, can you say, coming into the arena, here comes Gumby. And so the officials would do that. And all of a sudden, I had a bunch of little kids coming up. Are you Gumby? And I'm like, yeah. And it hooked and it caught on so well that I said, well, I might as well embrace it. And the next thing I know, I went to full-on green cars. I built a 6-foot foam Gumby doll that I would mount on the roof of my cars. And I started just doing everything the same as Gumby, Gumby, Gumby. And it hooked. And, I've had many companies named Gumby's Towing, Gumby's Automotive. It's actually been a huge blessing. And it has been an easy way to get notoriety, I guess, in the sport. it actually probably had a lot to do with the Kings of Crash opportunity back in 2012, I believe it is, and I'll tell you the story about that later if you want. But yeah, I got the name and it hooked, and now most people don't even know my real name, and half the time I don't even remember what my real name is because everybody calls me Gumby. At work, all my employees call me Gumby, and it's just what it is.
So if that's how you got the name Gumby, how did you get the number 000?
It was different. And I don't know. I don't really remember the story. I think I just put a 000 on the side. Does that count? And they said, "Oh yeah, that works. That's your number now." And I'm like, and it just stuck. And now I still do it most of the time, unless somebody doesn't. There's some shows you go to that says we need 2 letters and 2 numbers and a letter, and sometimes I'll change up that way. But it just stuck, and I've been doing it since probably started in the early 90s. Probably 93, 94 was the 000.
So, well, that's pretty cool. So you mentioned Kings of Crash a little bit ago. How did that all get started?
Back in about 2010, there was a film production company up in Park City, Utah. Is a pretty big film industry area. There's a lot of production companies and stuff, companies up there that do that kind of stuff. And there was a production company that was in town during the summers, and Official Productions, they did a lot of shark shows for National Geographic and companies like that. Really cool shark shows. And they had the company in town for a little while to do some business. And there was a derby up in Utah about that time, and they said, "Hey, you guys want to have some fun and go to the local derby?" And they're like, "Oh, sure, let's go do something different and fun." And they took them to the derby in Utah. And Utah derbies are really about entertainment. They do a lot with the crowd. And they went to this show, and I think it was either in Camas or Heber. And the production, or the film crews, or the production company and the TV executives are like, "This is fantastic. Is anybody doing a show about derbies?" And they're like, "I don't think so." And they said, "Hey, Fisher, we work with you. We like what you do. Why don't you talk about producing a show and pitch it to us and make what's called a scissor wheel, which is about a 5 to 10 minute quick video of what it would look like and how it would act on screen," meaning the whole production. And they called a couple drivers and they said, "Hey, we got a guy named Gumby that derbies we know." And they said, "Gumby, that's an interesting name." They said, let's meet with him and a few other drivers. And we went to a meeting and they said, "Hey, can you guys do a derby so we can make a scissor wheel so we can introduce it to a network," which was Velocity at the time. And we're like, "It's January. There's no more derbies." And they said, "Can you wait till next year?" And they're like, "No, we can't." So we got on and found a derby over in Arizona that was in the end of February, I believe it was. And they said, "Okay, can you guys build a car and take it to this show in Arizona?" And we're like, "Sure." And we did that, and they cut a video together, made it, and then we didn't hear anything back for about a year as they were discussing it. And then all of a sudden, we started filming in July. It was in July. About end of June, they called and said, "Hey, we were picked up. We need to make that TV show. Can we start in 2 weeks?" And we're like, "That's not how this works." But we said, it is luckily derby season. And they said, "Let's get a schedule together. Let's find some." They did a bunch of interviews with other drivers and said, "We like these guys. Let's do this show." And they gave us 2 weeks notice to have cars ready to go sign up. And we actually went to Camas, was the first show, which was a good show to start out with. And then we did eight episodes in 11 weeks. And so we had no prep lead time, we just had to start building cars. What it doesn't show is, there was a lot of the animosity and the battles going on. It didn't show that I was actually, my shop pretty much shut down for 8 weeks, and all my employees were helping build cars. We were building stripping cars for Ryan Sweat, Mont Sweat at my shop. They would come down, pick them up, take them up to their house, finish the stuff. We were building my cars. One of the episodes, it was just so chaotic. One of the episodes we were at in Evanston, I believe it was, they came to my shop 2 days before the show and said, a couple of the drivers can't make it. Can you have a car ready for that show? And I'm like, I have nothing started for me. And we had just bought a junk car. It was a coil spring, like Oldsmobile. I said, well, that one runs. Pull that car in. And we had it ready 2 days later for Evanston. And didn't have the greatest luck on the show, but we were building cars so fast for everybody. It was just a whirlwind of building, and having some fun TV experiences, seeing all that. But that's how it started. It was just a fluke. And, been there, done that. It was pretty cool.
So whatever happened to it? Did the network not pick up 2 seasons?
It had really good ratings. Now, they did the first season. They had actually built contracts and signed us all up to do season 2. And then at the last minute, they had a couple other shows that were costing them too much money to do, but they were higher rated, shows. They said, we can't afford to do all the shows. So they looked at ours and said, no, let's just cancel Kings of Crash. I mean, we had drivers like TJ McPhee that came on mid-season. They'd put him under contract to be a driver, and a couple other drivers they picked and signed up for season 2. And we were within probably a month of starting season 2, and they just pulled it out and said we weren't going to do it again. So it's too bad. It would have been, we were ready for season 2. It would have been a lot different, but it would have been fun too. And it's too bad. I would have really liked to seen how it would have done going another season or 2.
So how many cars did you guys end up having to build that year in total?
Everybody was if you were a contract driver, I was a contract driver, Mont Sweat was a contract driver, Ryan Sweat was a contract driver, Jared Lazenby was a contract driver. We all had to guarantee be at 5 or 6 shows. I don't remember what the number was. And we were eligible to go to the other 2, but they would pay you an allotment to make sure you showed up at those shows, and made, so they would fill their show. And then Johnny Gullo, Dalton Gullo, TJ McPhee, they went to Camas and saw TJ McPhee and fell in love with his style of driving and all that, and said, hey, Gumby, do you know TJ McPhee? And I said, I do. They said, can we get him to come to the shows? And they made a deal with TJ to get him to come to the shows. And so I would say I built 4 cars, 4 cars, maybe 5, I don't remember. And then we helped, of course, Ryan and Mont and everybody build their cars at my shop, and all this in an 8-week period, 9 week. No, it was 10 weeks, because it was 8 shows in 10 weeks.
So how much better do you think the season after that would have been when you guys were going to be like actually properly prepared?
Oh, it would have been a game changer. It would have been fun because then all of a sudden it's already been on TV. And you would have had a lot of people trying to come in and make a case that those drivers that were selected were no good, and they should have taken me instead. So they would have come gunning for us, which would have been fun. I mean, that's what makes good TV, is that battle and so it would have been fun. And again, we would have been most of us had 3 or 4 cars relatively done and built for the year after. And so we would have been a lot I wouldn't have had as many mechanical problems probably, and it would have been a lot better. But shoot, I even had my new T-shirt designed, and because at that point they wanted to create. It's about creating a giant facade and a style, and we all had T-shirts designed and made, and it was all ready. Trailers, we probably would have had painted up trailers, and it would have been fun, but it wasn't meant to be.
Did they ever reach out? Did anything ever come of it? Like after they kind of basically stopped the show that year, or did anything ever reach out or do anything like that again?
No, no. I know there was talk about it, but I think they've got so many other projects. I think right after that, the network had some financial difficulties, and they really preferred. Kings of Crash was probably one of their most expensive productions that they had, because most of them would be like, what's in your barn? They did automotive shows about finding a cool 67 Hemi Charger in a barn in North Carolina. So they'd fly one camera crew out and open the barn door and film it, and they created an episode. When you did Kings of Crash, you had 5 or 6 film crews full time filming the show, had to be out in the pits, had to be everywhere to catch anything and everything that happened. Instead of following one person around, they had to follow 5, 6, 7. You had to have the people on on the inspection booth. You had to have people, the camera set up in the arena. You had to have every pit crew had to have its own team, and sort of like the camera crews that were filming ours were the same people that were on Deadliest Catch, the boats. If you ever watched that show, some of those camera crews were the same camera crews that were filming our shows. And so it was very costly. I think that had a lot to do with it being canceled, because you had to have so many crew members to do that. And true TV crews are not cheap. I mean, you're talking each person $40-50 an hour or more. It was expensive to produce.
So going from Kings of Crash, you're pretty heavily involved in that new show, that Gladiators of Steel, correct?
Yeah, Well, there was another show that we filmed. There was another producer out of California that really liked Kings of Crash, and he followed it. And a couple years after, he had called and said, "Hey, I've got some funding. I want to produce another show, and we'll put it on another bigger network and do another show because it's got untapped potential." And so he came up with a bunch of money, and we filmed another show, but they created one episode out of it. And then I think he ran out of money. I don't know what the whole story was, but he stopped doing anything after the first episode was finished. He showed us the first episode. It was amazing. It was probably better than Kings of Crash by quite a bit. And it just stopped. And then all the drivers were like, "What's going on? How are we? Is this ever going to happen again?" And nothing. We knew nothing. And then a couple, probably, what was it, 2-3 years ago, we talked about it and said, "Look, we've done this. We know how it works. We filmed Kings of Crash. We got some investors, and we invested a lot of money in getting Kings of Crash going, and we filmed three basic shows. Vegas was one of the Vegas shows was one, and they created Kings of Crash. No, actually, it wasn't Vegas. It was State Fair and a few others. But we created a new show, and it was fun. It's just, anybody that says it's not fun to do that, it's an extra layer of adrenaline. It's fun to have people calling you names and screaming and yelling at you, saying you're no good. So it was fun to do Kings of Crash. We did it. But in between the time that we produced it and it was done, the gentleman that was going to sell it to the big network that had all the ties to some of the big networks that were wanting to look at it died of cancer. And so just bad breaks. And so we ended up having a beautiful piece of work that we couldn't really sell to the network because none of us had that expertise of the backside. You have the filming side, which is one group, the cast, but none of us knew how to do that backside. And so we decided through the gentleman that did the filming, or the director, that he was going to create Wheelhouse and launch it there. And it did well, but there was no way to really tie it in like a network does nationally, because it was all word of mouth. And so it did okay. It would have done much better if we could have got it on a on the national stage, on a national network to produce it. I think it would have done really well. We had enough filming to do a full episode or full season of that. And then last year we filmed another spinoff of that called Smash Up, which is just I think he's getting ready to release that. But it'll be interesting to see where all that goes. I don't have a lot of, until they find a national network to do it, it would be hard to really be financially able to do it, because those episodes, those shows cost, Kings of Crash was well over $1 million to produce that. And, the show that we did 2 years ago and we only got 1 or 2 episodes and filmed, and we were already over 300,000. So it's expensive to do, and to do it the right way. I mean, the one thing is, you might not like some of the characters, but I tell you, to watch the filming and how crisp, and the cameras are all motion picture cameras at every one of those shows. I mean, it is $10,000-$15,000 with equipment rental just to film one of those shows, to get that quality of picture and sound, and then it goes through all the editing, and it's crazy what it takes to do one of those.
So do you think that, like, the idea, like the basically reality TV show for Demolition Derby, do you think that's like ever going to be a big thing, or do you think that's just an idea of the past?
Reality TV shows are the cheapest form of entertainment that a network can put on, because you're not paying actors a ton of money. You look at what Friends did. By the end, when Friends started, an actor, they were unknown actors and they were relatively cheap actors. But by the end of the whole thing, they were having to pay each of those actors $1 million an episode. Reality TV shows don't have to do that. They paid us a fee. I think it was like $3,000 or $4,000 a show, just because we were having to stop our lives to build for 8 weeks. So they helped us out a little bit, but it's cheap for networks. Is reality TV really good for derbies? I don't think it is, because it's all about if there's a fight, they want to magnify everything and make it look real, when a lot of it is not real. Kings of Crash had a lot of, when we signed the contract to do it, for instance, what people don't know is you had to sign your likeness and your image over to the network. And it said, basically in a roundabout way, it says, we're allowed to use what you say, how we want to, when we want to, and your image, how we want to. And for instance, I'm actually more of an aggressive driver than they wanted to portray, because they had Mont Sweat, they had Ryan Sweat, they had TJ McPhee that filled that role. They didn't need another kamikaze. They needed the baggers. And so I fit. They've put me into that and said, we want you to be more of this style. We want you to talk this style. And And so that's what I was. I was the sandbagger, or one of the sandbaggers. And so that's just how it played out. What Kings of Crash was that. What Gladiators of Steel was truly a documentary. It really was not, there wasn't words used in one episode and cut out of it and put in another episode. It was all in line with how it happened. And so that was a documentary. Would that work? Sure. Anytime that somebody can see nationally, can see a demolition derby on your screen in your home and say, wow, that's where it's gone, or holy cow, this is cool. I want to go see one. And if it can draw new audiences to derbies across the country, that's the goal. It's fabulous. And so I like documentaries. I think what, you see what Sam Williams is doing right now. Everybody's trying. Derbies anymore are doing something that is different than everybody else, because what is there, 2,000 plus derbies a year in the country? How many of those derbies are the same? Put 10 cars out in the arena, beat them up, move on to the next heat. So, now you're starting to see the team shows came out, 10 years ago, and now everything else is changing. Now Sam Williams has got this new idea of creating a series coast to coast, and it's actually been talked about and tried. I know of 3 or 4 different times of different promoters trying to create this series coast to coast. Great idea. Hard to do, because you really almost have to have promoters across the country that are with you in your way of thinking. And how do you create a series that's the same from coast to coast and not have a lot of variety? It's going to be tough for him, but Sam's been around for a long time. He's very good possibility he could pull it off. It's going to be interesting to see years 2, 3, and 4 to see how that works. If he keeps the excitement level up, what's in it for the drivers? Because really anymore, you look coast to coast, there are so many good promoters out there. I mean, here in Utah, we've got 6 or 7 fantastic promoters. And there's a lot of money now. And drivers are actually finally starting to get the money that they deserve in the shows, because we have shows that are selling out 8,000 to 12,000 people in a day. They sell out that many seats for $25 a head, and times that by 8 to 12, and then they get the sponsorship money and everything else that goes in on top of that. There's a lot of money, and they're starting to pay the drivers, and that's going coast to coast. I was talking to a driver a couple nights ago from California, and I said, it's great to see, I think it's Blaine Williams and a few of these guys. There's some other promoters out there that are doing great jobs bringing the prize money up in California. It's fantastic to see. And of course, you have your big shows in the Midwest. That's really the bedrock of derbies is the Midwest. And then you have a lot of great shows East Coast. Josh Decker and his crew, the San Filippo and I forget what the name of his main company is, but they do some pretty big shows up there that are, San Filippo Smash. I went out to it probably 4 or 5 years ago, and props to that. I mean, you have 350 drivers showing up for not a dime in prize money, but to go to a cause the San Filippo disease. I don't know if that's the actual name, but it's just amazing. And they hit and they put on a show. There's great shows all over, but the Midwest has got that, the people that live, breathe, and die derbies. A lot of that's the Midwest. It's crazy.
So you've been obviously all across the country for derbying. What do you think makes different areas so much differently? Like, just for example, I've never been out to Utah, but like the stuff I've seen and the stuff I've heard, it's like it sounds like it's two different worlds compared to over here out east. Why do you think that is?
And I wouldn't even say I'd say Midwest, because you go out to, like I said, Josh Decker's show, they're bonsai. I mean, they lay it down. It's how you're raised. I mean, being a religious, if you a religious person, you were raised in a church, and that's the way you start to think. That's the way you start to act. In a derbies, it's the same way. I mean, you were raised. You go over into Kentucky, and you see Wicked. I think it's Wicked Promotions. They put on a bunch of shows over that way, and all their drivers that work with them, they have pretty much a style of driving. It's more. I would say a lot of it is more methodical. It's strategy. It's competition to win. Here in Utah for years, the money wasn't all that good. It was about just laying out and having a good time and destroying people and destroying your cars and having a good time. And then the money came into it. When money came into it, it slowed Utah way down. I mean, Utah took a huge step back when it came to entertainment value and went more to driving for the money. It's coming back a little bit. The last couple of years, I've been very impressed. Utah's had some wicked shows. You have shows in Utah that have paid, I think the record, I said, I might be off by a few dollars, but it was $10,000 or $12,000 went to the most aggressive driver of the night. That is a lot of money for most aggressive driver, and it's common. We Stern Dirt Racing, what I'm part of, we're paying in the main events, we're paying $3,000-4,000, I believe, to the top two most aggressive drivers of the heat of the main event. So we spent a lot of money trying to make sure that our crowd comes back next year. So that's by putting on a show. But it's really about how it's been ingrained into you, how you've been taught to drive. Dad's like, okay, I want you to, when you go out there, keep moving forward, watch the car, don't hit a car really hard, hit only here, save your this, and it's how you've been taught and how you've been raised. And I think that's really the difference in what's created different styles. For there in Utah and the shows, we were always talking about, back east, you got to go watch a show that's 2.5 hours long. That's no fun to watch. Probably not for a Utah crowd that's used to a 20-minute, 25-minute main event when you're junk in 25 minutes. Going to a show that's 2 to 3 hours long, and there have been some shows that are 2 to 3 hours long. And is it bad? No, it's good. It's different. And you have to appreciate all the different styles. But it's an ingrained in your head what your reasoning for being out there is, and it's really the promoter's responsibility to keep that curtailed. I mean, I saw Tim from Smash It out there in the arena in one of the heats of Blizzard Bash this year. It's unseen. He's walking out there ripping sticks down because they realize that that's not a promoter's responsibility. Is a couple things. You got to give the drivers something to drive for: prize money, a fun event, fairness, but something that's entertaining where you really want to. Then you have the promoter needs to have the opportunity to make a few bucks, have a good experience doing it. That's because a driver loves to drive. A promoters generally like to promote. It's something that's enjoyable for them. And then the most important part is the people that you get to come that aren't family, that aren't friends, that are people that live 5 miles down the road, that it's their fair, they come to the show, they need to be truly entertained, which means not a lot of methodical. It's just balls to the walls. Let's try to kill each other, put on a show, have fun. And that's what they want. So a promoter that can do all three of those things at one time is generally very successful. If one promoter really looks out for him making the bucks and the drivers and forgets about the crowd, they're not near as successful. And so we've learned that through our 23, 24 years. You have to put all aspects in and make sure all three facets do well. Or if not, you're not going to have a successful show. There are exceptions. There are what's called, I call them destination shows. Blizzard Bash, the show that Sam just put on in South Dakota, those are destination shows where and when we did Vegas, it's a destination show. We're not thinking that we're going to be drawing 5,000 people from the town to come watch us. We're banking that when we put on this show, that drivers are going to want to fly in and rent hotels and be there for this experience. Blizzard Bash, perfect example. Very few people that are watching that show are there from Topeka. And that's why Topeka loves it so much, because their hotels sell out, their restaurants fill up. The money that's spent in Topeka, that's a destination show. And, they're different, but they're fun. Love them. Hopefully I made some sense there. Your sound is gone. Did I hit mute? I don't know if I can. I've lost all sound. Lucky people, right? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Oh, let's see. Nope. Ooh. Oh, lost.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, and I'm logging back in because it kicked me out. I lost all sound. I'm just loading back in. There we go. Yeah, Inner Studio.
That's really hot. How the hell is there two of them? Yeah. Weird. Yeah, there's two of them.
Yeah, I'm loading back.
Oh, that's not good.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. I can hear you.
I don't know
Can you
what
hear
happened.
me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, here we are. That was weird.
And usually it's because I touched something, but I didn't touch a thing. So,
how did you get into promoting derbies with Stir and Dirt?
It's been about 22 years ago. Johnny and myself were both drivers. I used to be president of what was called the Utah Demolition Derby Drivers Association. So I was involved in promoting myself 3 or 4 Utah shows. Back in those days, there was only about 7 or 8, maybe 9 shows that were around, and I promoted 3 or 4 of them. And Johnny Gullo and his dad started a charity, and to raise money, they decided to put on a big show called the Hot Rock and Fourth. And back then, prize money in Utah was $1,000 to win, sometimes $1,500, which we thought was just killer money. But we saw that all the cities around were doing, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 in profits on these shows, which was going good to help pay for their fares and to help build something on their property, there was nothing wrong with that. But they weren't paying the drivers anything. And the drivers were, $1,500, which was good. It's like, nah, that's not right. And Johnny and I were at a show once, and he did the Hot Rock and Fourth for the first time and paid $5,000 to win. And we were like, this is awesome. And I was talking to him, and he goes, we ought to just join forces, put all of our shows together, create a company and start promoting derbies. And we created Stern Dirt Racing. And that was like 20, I think it's been about 22 years ago. And our whole mission to start was really to create a way for drivers to get what they deserve. That was the main purpose behind it, forcing, using our leverage of our, we've got shows that we produce that are popular and successful and they're making money, was to use it to basically twist the arms of these cities to ante up a little bit of money and give the drivers some more money. And then we just started doing it. And we decided to start putting on a couple of our own shows, which we've done a lot of different shows. We've done Winter Wipeout in Utah, where we did 3 indoor shows. We've done Hot Rockin' Fourth was Johnny Gullo and his dad's charity rate show. And then we started doing May Mania and Halloween Havoc and multiple other ones we've done throughout the years. And we just got good at it. Or Johnny's good. Johnny is, I will tell you, and I've said this to a lot of different people, when it comes to a physical promoter, somebody that knows how to get people's butts in the seats to watch it, that are outside of the Derby families, and to let everybody know in the market, he's, if not the best, he's one of the best. Some people say he's OCD, and he gets a little criticism for some of his ways he does the stuff, and I understand that, but he's good. The boy is good. And he, there's no anybody, I mean, I go to shows back east, and I see their crowd and I see how they do stuff. And I'm like, they need Johnny to come help them get this thing going, because he's that good. I've seen it. I've seen him do shows for people outside of Utah just to help out, and it works. And he'll drive you nuts doing it. He drives me nuts, and I drive him nuts. He's a deep red personality to a T, and I'm as yellow as they come. And he tells me to do something, I don't do it just because it rubs him wrong, and it's sort of fun to harass him a little bit. But he's really good at what he does, and I know that. He needs me a lot just because I'm the one that can talk to the drivers, and some drivers get agitated with him pretty easy. And that's my side of I'm the PR in some ways type of person. And so, but yeah, that's how we got together. We started doing it, and we've been doing it for years. And, our goal was to do, about 10 years in, we said, let's do Vegas. And it took us years. It was like 8 years trying to get into Vegas. And we finally got into Vegas, and we're like, wow, that was cool. And then Vegas, because of COVID and everything, fell up. COVID really just killed Vegas. Just for that 2 years, we kept trying to put another one on, and it kept getting scheduled and canceled because they're like, nope, we're not open yet. Can't do it. It's canceled. We're like, all right on. And so, yeah, we've been doing a lot of shows. I don't know how many more years that we've said the last 3 or 4 years we're about done. It'll be interesting to see how many more years we go. I know we'll probably do this year. I know this year's a full go. I wouldn't be surprised. I would almost say that we're going to do another big show or two just to go out. When we decide to go out, I think we will want to go out with a bang and just blow the Derby world up, do something really fun. We'll see.
So, do you think Vegas will ever happen again?
I would say I would like to. Since COVID's happened, we've been on the phone with them every 3 or 4 months to see what the possibilities are. The problem with Vegas is cost. And it's a union state where the union is involved in almost, you need to have barriers brought in to do for our insurance requires barriers around, not dirt berms. To bring in barriers, the companies that do that in Vegas are all union. You have no idea what it costs to bring in them barriers. To do sound systems and set them up, they're unions. You have to pay union fees to get that done. And what it costs to put a show on in Utah, it's 2.5 times that in Vegas. That's how much it costs us. And so you can imagine a show that costs you, I mean, we would never want to do Vegas again unless we could do equally to what we did prior to COVID. And those shows are going to be hard to top. I mean, the detail that was put into those shows, because it had been something that we wanted to do for years. Johnny went apal on detail from music that was played in the arena to the award ceremony being out on Fremont Street with Vegas showgirls, wrestling arenas. It was above and beyond, and the venue is unable to match. There's 4 venues in Vegas, maybe 5 that I know of. We've contacted all of them. But the question that we have to ask ourselves, including Las Vegas Motor Speedway, we've met with them, we've been there, talked to them. They've said, yes, we would love to do one, but it wouldn't be near the experience that they had at the Plaza. To be able to be up on the roof in the pool of the Plaza, looking down on the Derby arena while it was going on, to be able to be in the Derby arena, run in between heats and put $20 down on a blackjack table, or after the show, jumping in the shower and going across the street onto Fremont Street for the party that they had, was unmatched. There's no other place in Vegas that has the ability, that has the parking to beat that experience. And unless you could beat it, it would be a letdown. And so we've said, till we can, and we're still in contact with the Plaza, but because of all the money that was lost during the COVID hiatus, they don't want to take on as much liability and costs to help produce a show like that. And so our company would have to incur more of the financial liability. And we didn't make money on either show. We lost, I think $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on one show as a loss, which was okay. I mean, if you make money on shows during the summer, sometimes you have to do something and have a banner that says we're in charge of it was fantastic to have that show, even though it lost money. Who else has done it? Nobody.
Yeah.
And I know endless promoters have called, I see it all the time. Hey, let's get a group together and go put on a Vegas show. But you can't do a show with that. You have 100 car max. You can't pull a Blizzard Bash style show into Vegas unless you want to go off strip, and then you're not going to have the same experience. And in Stern Dirt's standpoint is we don't want to do anything that is less than we've already done in Vegas, and that's a hard one to top. And so would it come back again? I would hope so. Would we be willing to do one? It'd be under the right situation. But again, it would, that show cost, I don't know. I just know it was $250,000 or so to put that show on the first time out of the hole, just because it costs. Everything's astronomical. And I don't own any of the equipment there. We have to bring it all in, and we own the equipment here and the ability. It's expensive, and how to do that, to set the bleachers up around the arena is still on Fremont Street or there at the Plaza, but the bleachers are all gone. And to bring in the bleachers for 1 week or to rent them for one show and to set them up, I believe is like $70,000 or $80,000 to bring them in. So who has to flip the bill on that? So yeah, it's crazy. If the bleachers were still there right now, it would be a lot more feasible to think we could do it. But we'll see.
Do you think there's another major city like that, like anywhere else in the U.S., that could be able to put on a show like that?
No. I mean, doing a derby in Madison Square Garden would be pretty cool. I think Sam Williams' idea, and it's the same idea that we had. We've talked to divisions of NASCAR in the past 10 years. We've talked to people that do NASCAR races. We've talked to owners that own NASCAR races. I think you could probably do under the right situation, if you could tie a demolition derby into NASCAR weekend and do a show while all the NASCAR fans are there so they can come and see what a derby is all about. We've talked about doing that, but again, they know what they have in a crowd and they don't want to give that money up, so it's expensive. We've talked to them about that. That's the sort of, we talked years ago about doing a show in Talladega, right down around the corner from Talladega while the NASCAR race is going on, and then maybe going over and doing one in Texas and one in California and doing 4 or 5 shows along with NASCAR races to really get the NASCAR fans to see what derbies are all about. But that would take 5 or 6 of the best promoters in the world and to ante up and spend a lot of money to do it. That would be something that would be fun, like unto a Vegas, but to match a Vegas, we have the opportunity right now, if we wanted to put on a show in Reno, Nevada, which is a big gambling town, but it would be different. It wouldn't be the
same.
I mean, when you're out in the middle of the arena and you take a camera and you can see casinos in the background and all the lights flashing, the car shut off and you can hear all the noise of Fremont Street, and I don't know how you would ever top that. That was probably the crown jewel. We've promoted a lot of really good shows. We've got we've got haters. We've got people that love us. But when it talks going around and saying, what's the crown jewel that we've had? That was it. That was those two shows in Vegas, and specifically the first show. The first show was lights out. I can't think of a show that went smoother, that was funner than that the drivers enjoyed because they didn't have to work on their car repeatedly. We had 3 different shows. You ran one night, you were done. The next group ran the next day and was done. The next group came in and ran. So you only worked on your car the one day, and then you just played and partied with all your friends the rest of the week. That show was probably the best show we've ever been a part of or put on. Absolutely hard to top. If you can't top it, why do it again? You know what I'm saying? That's really what our attitude is. You can't top it, why do it?
So you mentioned a little bit ago that you guys put on a few indoor shows. What indoor shows did you guys put on?
We did some in the Golden Spike Arena. It was Winter Blast, we called them. We did. We had a smaller. It was a 4,500 seat arena in Utah, Golden Spike Arena, and it wasn't a huge arena, so you could only put 6, 7, maybe 8 cars in the arena at a time. But here in Utah, they're very, very much. No, I'm not going to say EPA, but health conscious about air quality. If you've ever been to Blizzard Bash, that's not air quality. That's poison. We could not do that here in Utah. The last show we did there, they kept shutting the show down and making us open the doors and put 25-minute breaks for it to air out in between heats because we couldn't get the smoke and the garbage out of the air quick enough. And they had meters, and anytime it would get to that point, they would shut the show down and say, you can't go any farther till you clean out the air. So we stopped doing them after that year because it was just, the crowd's like, well, why'd you stop for half hour? Because we were told by the Board of Health that we had to. So they were good. They sold out. As soon as we put them on, we had a sold out car count and sold out ticket sales within a day. They were that popular, but we just couldn't health-wise do it.
I can know exactly what you're talking about. There was this around here. There's this little indoor show at the Summit Motorsports Complex this local promoter Fair Derby puts on. Last year was their first year. By the end of that show, I didn't even stay for the whole thing. I couldn't I was breathing funny for a week. Like my throat hurt for the next 2 weeks after that, and it was just terrible.
That's Blizzard Bash, and I understand. I've been to Blizzard Bash 5, 6, 7 times. I love that show. I absolutely, to me, 4 or 5 days of Derby, and I'm all about it. I mean, the Derbies themselves, the first night or two are the show. You know, the heads up is the best thing. Best thing Sam Williams did to his new show is go heads up all the way through. I'm like, brilliant move, because that's what everybody wants to see. They don't want to see, there's 3 teams out here, but 2 of them are friends, so they're going to go beat up on the other team. That's not Derby. That's just that giant way of being a bully, I guess. Blizzard Bash, the first night, by far the best night of the whole show. You can't it's where the upsets happen. It's where the stuff you couldn't think of happened. It's where teams, come in that they underestimate you and then they beat the top dog. That happens on the first night. You don't see that after that, because then it goes into multiple teams and so on and so forth. Still a fantastic show, but it's all about the atmosphere. I call it going to the Derby Mall, where all the narratives and all the big companies are there selling parts. I mean, that's where everybody's hanging out, looking at all the new gadgets that you can buy. I mean, that's half the fun of it. Going through the pits and out in the parking lot where everybody's working on the cars. That's half, if not more than half of the fun. And so that's a great show.
Have you ever ran out there?
Totally lost. What was that?
Have you ever ran out there, Blizzard?
Have I ever ran? I ran one time, and it was the year after Kings of Crash. And when I got there, it did create a little bit of notoriety, and everybody would come up and talk. And me being a social person, I loved to sit and talk to people. I got all the way into the arena and forgot to change my battery. I had a battery in the car when I pulled out that was just my starter battery, and 3 minutes into the heat, my battery went dead and I was out, and my brand new battery was sitting in my truck. I just was so busy being me, talking to people, that I forgot to put my battery in, and it cost me. And it's the only time I went, and every time I've went to sign up since then, it fills up so fast. And I'm not interested in doing anything other than the one and dones, like a wire, the old iron, the stock shows, and that's what I like. I like cars that bend. I like exhaust out through the hoods and stuff, but I'm not into these $30,000 cars. I think $30,000 cars balance talent. I see people that are considered, some of them are considered to be the best drivers in the state because they outbuilt you, not because they outdrove you. And I don't think they're the best drivers. Outbuilding, you can outbuild your bad driving style by building a nasty car with cool parts. And I really don't think sometimes those are the best drivers out there. I think in a wire class show or a light weld show with just moderate aftermarket upgrades, that's going to tell you what kind of driver you are. Your skill, your style, your $30,000 worth of parts. That doesn't tell you you're a good driver. But sometimes that's how we choose who the best drivers. I mean, if you say who are the best drivers, who are they going to tell you? They're going to go across the name of drivers that build nasty parts. And I'm not saying they're the best drivers in the world at all. I think sometimes they might be the most dedicated to their sport because, man, they build some Picassos. Those cars are beautiful. But I see some of them drive, I'm like, they're not that great. And I see some drivers that drive in some of the other lower tier cars. There's some drivers out there that are just fabulous, that are amazing. And I'm like, now that's a driver you want to drive against because he's going to challenge you all night long.
I can agree with that. Like even so, not basically this year and the last year is kind of like when I got out of the youth class, and the youth class is like I ran for Casey Smith's youth SMW youth full size, and that was always a light build. But like even getting into like these pro stock Ohio pro stock cars basically it's two different worlds. Like even in the youth class, I've said it once and I'll say it again. I think a lot of those youth drivers, they're like driving from the SMW youth class and then going to jump into a big car class immediately right after. That a lot of them youth kids, they drive a lot smarter than a lot of those adults do. Which
and I will tell you, we started at youth class in Casey, the Smith Metal. They are awesome people, and Frankie Guy and his group that's helped amazing groups of, they're in it for the right reason. They're really trying to help out, and I think promoters across the country are finally seeing that right now the youth is the wave of the future, and if you don't do the youth, the derbies in your state are going to drop dramatically. I will tell you, we started doing wire class. Joker moved out here 2-3 years ago, and we started talking to him, and he goes, back east they're doing the wire class, and we started looking into that, and he goes, now there's more wire classes that show up at one of those than they get in 5 shows of regular builds. And he says, you start doing wire class, they're going to blow up. So we started doing wire class, and it saved Utah derbies. It really did, because it's got people that stopped driving back in cars doing it because it's easy to build cars. We were able to start the youth class in the wire cars. And these kids, from when they started 3 years ago to where they're at now, they're completely different styles of drivers. You have them with skill, with mindset, with theory. They look at a derby arena different than they did the first time out in the arena. And now we're doing this year, we said, I still don't want them to go up with the big boys, because if you're not in a group with the big boys, you get tore up, and then you say, man, I spent all summer building that car and I got knocked out in 5 minutes and it's destroyed. I'm not going back out. It ruins it for people. And so we're doing what's called an old Heber City. The boys that run the show this nowadays up there put on an old iron wire class last year, and I went to watch it, and I said, wow, that is an amazing class. And I said, one of the things I've heard from the youth drivers is we want to move up. We want to start buying shifters. We want to start buying drive lines. We want to start buying headers, because we don't allow any of that in our youth class.
So it's just like very the windows simple, out and go.
It is pretty much stock engines, trannies, drive lines, and go. And weld the bumpers on lightly, nothing, no welding anywhere else, no body bolt changing. It's simple. And they're like, but we want to do this. We want to go up a class. And so we said, why don't we move up to an old iron? So we have an old iron for adults, and now we're going to have an old iron wire for youth, which is that they can now start buying a few older cars a little bit, and now they can start buying some of the parts and start to learn the next game. And we're trying to progress them up the ladder a little bit slower than other people have had that opportunity. And they're having fun. And then if they do the old iron youth wire, they can always move back down and still do the 80s wire, and then go back and forth and have fun all summer long doing that. And so that's what we're doing now. This year, we'll see how it goes, but we're giving away a brand new Schrade engine to if there's 10 or 12 youth drivers at that show, one of those 12 youth drivers is going to walk away with a brand new Schrade engine as a prize for driving in that heat. And, we're going to help start giving them parts that they can start building their inventory of parts, so they can start building cars. Then maybe in 3 years they can go build it and go run with the TJ McPhees and all these guys and have that experience and get them there slowly.
That sounds like a great idea. Like around, so I ran. So the first SMW, youth full size they had around here locally was at Keystone Nationals when Bo Lockwood still had it. And that the first one they ever did, the winner got a red line along with winning the Derby. I had something stupid happen to me that night. I forget what it was. But then just going after that, like it's amazing to see around here how like that everybody talks about unified rule sets, but Casey Smith is like the first one to do that because they use the same youth full size rules from South Carolina to at least Indiana. I think I don't know how far west it goes.
The key is getting promoters to buy in, because every promoter that's out there is in competition with the other promoter because we're all vying for the same driver. And so getting drivers promoters to buy in, and it's the same with our company. Over the years, we used to not want to do a lot of things the same as everybody else because it's like, why help? And in the last 2 years, we've really started to change. It's like this year we called Brad Bowman and those that are doing the Heber show. And we said, look, we're going to do an old iron wire because we wanted to get the youth involved in that and move them up a little bit. And we said, we're not going to build our own rules. Drivers are tired of us having our own rules. We said, what are your rules? And we got them. We said, can we change this up and just talk to them about a few things? And we're like, you write them. We're going to put them in our show, and that's what we're going to use. And it's cool to see. That's what you have to get is promoters to buy in. And sometimes it's hard.
So what are those old iron wire rules exactly? Do you get like any rear end shifter? Like what exactly do they let you do?
You're allowed a lower cradle half. You're going to run the front plate. You're allowed headers. You're allowed shifters, brake pedals, drive line brakes, and any rear end that is factory non-braced. So if you want to build a Ford 9-inch and put it in a car, you can build the gear sets of a Ford 9-inch, but you can't brace it, no axle savers. And you can use a 8-inch center for the wheels, any wheels, 8-inch center, no solid metal or no solid homemade wheels. It's just basic wheels with 8-inch centers. Weld your bumpers on.
What's the bumper?
Simple.
What kind of bumper are you guys allowing? Like any just factory bumper?
In those classes, if you put a loaded bumper on, you're going to ruin your car way too quick because there's nothing else done to them. They bend real quick. So really, you want factory bumpers on the cars, non-loaded, and the car will last longer.
I agree with that. Like that's the rules you just described to me. Those sound like basically the exact same thing Casey did for the SMW class when he started it.
It's great. Love it. I'm going to love it. That's what I would love to run in is that class.
So why have you never really liked harder builds at all?
I'm lazy. No. I've never been most Derby drivers that are out there are amazing fabricators. That's never been my thing. I can, you put me in a car with anybody that are built the exact same. I can hold my own in a car. I'm a pretty good driver, but I'm not the best of builders. It's never been my forte. That's why I like more old school. Old school I can build with anybody because there's not a lot you can do. And that's probably why I stick to old school is because the build's a lot less. And I'm getting old. The heavy builds came along back when I was really in my early 40s, and by that time, a lot of the sports passed me by. And I'm old school. I say I'm old school because I am. I don't have the same thought process when it comes to why we do it. I'm not into if you win, great. I don't care. It's fun just going out there and banging it up with the boys and having a good time. So it's just a different mindset. And I'm old enough that I would rather not spend that much money on a car. I spent more money on a car this year that I didn't get to drive than I've ever spent on a car that I got to drive. It was, yeah. and it's still sitting in my garage. So I got to go fix it and run it, and it'll be interesting. I mean, it's the first time I've ever bought an engine. I bought a stage 2 Schrade, and it's a running fool. And I drove it for the first time 3 months after it got derbied by somebody else because I had to pull it into my garage so it didn't get loaded full of water during the winter. And I was like, wow, this thing runs.
So what is the derby parts market like out there? Because like around here, pretty much anybody within a 50-mile radius sells pretty much almost anything you need with a Plas table. Is it like that out there? Or is it like they're not a lot of parts?
No, everybody out here buys from everybody out there. There's very, very, very few builders out here of parts. And so a few years ago, I bought a trailer and went out and spent about 80 grand buying all their parts, brought them back to Utah, and was selling them for, I went to the builders and said, hey, I need 25% off these parts, and I'll spend $10,000, $15,000 on your trailer. And a lot of them did that, and I brought them home and sold them back for the 20% more than what they were selling them for with no shipping, and did really well. And so most of it is NLR and Narrett and Ski and all the other great builders out there.
Why do you think that like the parts market never took off out that way?
Don't have the base of drive. You figure, how many people show up to a show in Ohio, Bash for Cash? 500, 400, 500 cars, and all the drivers that come in to watch it. Blizzard Bash, same thing. All these shows, they have a huge driver base turning out. A Utah show, when you go to a show, a super big show, a fair show during the summer is 70 cars. And most of the drivers are there. So you don't have the base of drivers to sell the parts to. You need people that are coming into those, what I call those destination shows, to really be a producer of parts. And since there's not that big of a show here, you're not going to make a ton of money producing parts here. It's already being done somewhere else, so we just order their parts and bring them in.
So what are the car counts doing out there? Are they going down over time, or are they going up?
They were drastically dropping, and then last year every show in Utah went up 20 to 50%. So did really well last year. It was very impressive. Every show in Utah went up in car count and did really quite well. It was pretty impressive.
Why do you think that?
Our shows, you have to understand that our shows, almost all of them, are designed to start and finish within a 3 to 4 hour block. You don't see shows here in Utah starting at noon. They usually start either 6 or 7. Most of them start at 7 o'clock, and at 10 o'clock, people are leaving the arena to go home. They're designed to be quick entertainment for the crowd, which is one of the things I told you is very important, is keeping the crowd excited. Crowd can't sit for 5-6 hours watching a show. They have to walk. Their butt gets too sore, and it changes the visual, the experience. And so an average show in Utah is probably between 30 and 40 cars at the show. I actually prefer a 30 to 40 car show. I mean, I always said the best show you could have is a 24 car main class and a 10 car side show. And it's cookie cutter. You start, you do your heats, you have a side show, you have a grudge match, you have a intermission of some sort in a main event, start, finish over 3 hours, you're done, go home. So, and a lot of Utah shows are mostly done in 3 to 4 hours, start to finish.
So is that the same way that big Heber show is? Because is that one of the biggest events out there in Utah? I don't really know a lot about Utah.
Heber it's a 2-day show now. We promoted that show for 4 or 5 years, and then another person won the contract on it, and it's virtually the same. It's a 2-day show. The shows they have last year they had all the big heats were on Friday. Saturday you have the grudge matches, the side shows, and a bunch of other stuff. And so, but they still are over start to finish in 3-4 hours each night.
So is that a fair that just the weekend is the Derby?
Wasatch County Fair. Yep. Great community, great city. It's a good show. Last year was an amazing show. I've said last year that I thought it was the best show in Utah last year. And that's not ours, so I'm not beating around the bush. It was a amazing show. The promoters did. I had to give them their thumbs up. They did a great job.
That's awesome. So out west, how much different is it derbying in California compared to Utah? Is it like two different places, or are they very similar?
There's a lot of similarities. Different builds a little bit. They're heavy, a lot more Fords. They do like the GMs and that out there, but they love their Fords out there. There's some things they're allowed to do a little bit more heavier on some of the builds, but then there's a lot of stuff that's a lot lighter than in Utah. Just a little bit different, but great shows. I've been to a lot of shows. I grew up in California. I've been to a lot of shows in California, and they're great shows. A lot of fun and really enjoy them.
So how does the economy affect the shows out there? Does it not really affect it at all? Because
I haven't seen a huge. If we were doing a 200 to 300 car count show, probably affect it. But 30, 40 cars, yeah. Most derby drivers, they're all welders, they're all fabricators, they have good paying jobs, most of them, and so it doesn't affect it too much. And ticket prices, they're $25 a head at most shows in Utah, so it's not it doesn't really affect ticket pricing either. Ticket prices continue to go up, and it's pretty amazing. So no, I haven't seen the economy. The economy, I haven't seen a huge drop off with anything. And most of our shows most of the drivers only have to drive, hour and a half to any one show. And so it's not that costly to travel, and they travel home, so they're not getting hotels and stuff.
Fun. So how many states have you ran derbies in?
I think I'm 8 or 9 right now.
How many times have you
back east?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
How many times have you ran out east?
I used to do Metal Mayhem, which is in Illinois, back when it was Torrey Schutte, and it was there was another gentleman right before him named. I ran a couple of times there. Ran in Jerseyville, Illinois. Blizzard Bash, and then I've been to shows, Florida, New York, South Dakota, Nebraska, all over the place. I was part of Track Shot Live there for a year, and had a chance to go to quite a few shows, and then with what we do, we've done a lot of shows throughout. I've been to a lot of shows. I like going to a lot of different shows.
So we're almost at the time, because you got to get off here soon to go back to what you guys were doing.
We can go if you need to go a little over, you can. But yeah.
So one of the last few questions I want to ask you is, what is one of your favorite parts about Demolition Derby?
It depends on the type of show. Destination shows, I like the ingenuity. You see Ski Inc. show up with one of his cars that he just wants to shock and awe everybody. I think that's pretty cool. I like to see the dedication and I love to see the passion of other drivers and the sport. I love the smell. I love the visual. I love everything about the sport. driving, of course, is probably my favorite. I love driving. I haven't driven for 5 years. Since I drove, I got hurt a couple years, 5 years ago, I got hurt, and that stopped me for a summer. And then I had some financial difficulty that shut me down. I just never got back into it till this year. I was supposed to drive. I was going to start driving again this year a little bit, and I got thrown in the hospital, almost lost some toes, and that happened the week of the show I built a car for, and I had to let somebody else drive my car. And my foot about midsummer just finally got back to good. So it was too late to get back in. It sort of threw me off for the year. So I think I'll drive again next year, at least one or two. I want to try one of these wire class. I might go up to that Heber show and do their old iron wire. It just looks fun, and it's something I think my body could probably handle for the first time, getting rocked again after 5 years.
So going off of that, what is one of your most favorite like memories involved with the Demolition Derby?
My original friends, the guys that got me into building cars and introduced me to where the derbies that I grew to know. I had a friend named Brett Barrett. I had a friend named Mel Fisher. I had a friend named Rocket Ron, and I had a friend named Steve Carroll. All of which, except for Rocket Ron, have died because of one died of an accident. Two of them died of cancer. And I still, to this day, when I build a car, I put their number with their color on every one of my cars to say, basically my way of saying thanks for the cool memories and what you did for me. But, when I think of derbies, my favorite is thinking back to when I was learning and growing. Of course, Kings of Crash was fun, and what that did. Promoting has been a lot of fun to see it's all, every aspect's got really good things in it. Getting to meet people and going to Blizzard Bash and other people's shows are fantastic. Getting to just watch and see how people do things, and and seeing all the redneck derby drivers. I mean, we have got some interesting characters in our sport, and that's sort of fun too.
So off of that, what is one of your least favorite parts about derbying?
The computer. The one thing that's going to kill derbies is the ability to be a derby keyboard driver that never gets in a car, that never has promoted a show, that isn't even at a show, that wants to create a huge uproar about something that he did not witness and doesn't know the facts. Derbies have been benefited because of computers, because the access to buy parts, the access to watch shows, your Derby Nation TV, your Track Shot Live, the one that we've done, Ciopas are now doing a big, those are because of innovation and technology. And we're able to, none of them are bad. Everybody's like, oh, do you like this? I'm like, I like them all, because they're all giving us derbies for virtually zero cost to very minimal cost. We can see a show in Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas on our screen that we would never have the chance to see. That is cool. That is awesome. We get interviews. I've seen drivers and seeing how the different builds are. That's cool, but it's also been a huge detraction, because you have people that think they know what's going on, causing drama and problems when they really don't have a clue what they're talking about. And people jump on and say, oh yeah, you're right. And I'm like, you sit back and go, man, you're wrong. So that's probably my least favorite, is what the computer does to derbying. It does probably more good than it does bad. And it makes, shows like Blizzard Bash would never happen if it wasn't for a computer because it's marketing ability, but it also does a tremendous amount of damage.
I can completely agree with that. I think the main problem with it is it gives everybody a voice, which is good and bad at the same time. When you have somebody, well, this is another thing I wanted to ask you about. When you have somebody chopping the back of a wagon off and so the leaf springs hang out, 50 people, well, no, it's more like 5,000 people, and every post is just saying how it's a waste of a wagon and a waste of all this stuff. Do you think that's a waste of a wagon?
Would I do it? No, because I'm not going to be that ingenuity and build something like that. There are huge benefits. The real question is it safe? I can see the argument both sides. I think there's some things that could be unsafe about it. The roof hanging all the way out there. If somebody decides to drive all the way across the arena and drive up into the back, maybe it could do some damage to a person. People get mad about stuff that they didn't think about first. They didn't think of it. Would I do that to a wagon? Maybe if I thought about it, because I had so many of them there for a while. Yeah, I'd maybe tried it. Why not? But here in Utah, it wouldn't be allowed. So I would have never thought about it because I'd be like, can't do it. Thought it was sort of cool and unique and different. But I don't think anybody ever really was given the opportunity to see how it would work outside of the one that Ski built for Blizzard Bash, where before they ever ran it, they cut the back off and pushed it. And I was like, well, that defeats the purpose. I wanted to see how it was going to fold, and it was cool and different. And what did it do? It created conversation about derbies. And so on that aspect, it was fun. And half the people that probably were talking about it have never stripped a car in their life. So they should just watch it and enjoy it.
Which, I find it fascinating because, lately, I don't know if you're on TikTok or anything like that, but on all these social media platforms, guys like Kinman, Tony Burkhart, Tyson Shelley at Clutch Models, all these guys are posting pictures, videos of how they're building their derby cars. Mm-hmm. And the amount of comments that if you just read through them for 10 minutes, everything they do is wrong. And I'm just sitting back dude, why are you so mad about it? You have to comment on it. Go build your own car and show them it's wrong. I don't get it. And
what I look at is I say, okay, you look at the comment and you say, when was the last time I saw your name being talked about as the winner of the big show? If you drove the show, what went wrong on your car? You did something wrong too, whether it was the build or the driving style. So you just don't listen to people, and you do things because you love the sport. You wish everybody well. And the idea is go hit the guy out in the arena and afterwards shake his hand and laugh with him and say, man, that one hurt. Or, man, look what you did to my car. That's the fun of it is just, a couple of years ago, you asked, do you know who Tori Schutte was? Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
I went to one of his shows one time. It was Metal Mayhem, and I took a Chevy wagon or Chevy sedan out there, and I went berserk, hitting everything and ruining everything. And I was ticking, and what my goal was I was looking for the nicest wagon out there that had the aluminum radiator in it because I knew that he was going to drive that car to win. And I thought it would be fun to pop that radiator so he didn't win. I didn't want to win. I didn't care about winning. And every time I did that, Tori came up and talked to me. He says, every time you do that, you'd tick them off so much they'd come and hit you. And the first thing you would do is look over at them and give them a thumbs up and smile. And he goes, I started doing that because it made him more mad after you would smile at him and give him a thumbs up than if you would have flipped him off, that they would have been satisfying to him. But I was giving him a thumbs up and smiling. And Tori's like, I love that. And that's the fun of it is you got to go out and have fun. It's more about the fun and the enjoying everybody and laughing with everybody and giving everybody congratulations after the heat. That's the fun part of it. So
I agree with that. Awesome. And just on that note, We're about out of time, Gumby.
Hey,
So
go have a great evening. Thanks for calling and putting me on here. And just for the note, I think the youth, I loved, I'd never met you other than talking on the phone for a minute. I popped up and I saw a young kid on here, and I'm like, that is awesome. I think you are what the sport needs. You're the future. Keep up what you're doing and run hard with it and love it, because you're going to be 54 and old like me, sitting on the other side of the table one of these years. And so congratulations and good job on what you're doing.
awesome. Thank you, Gumby. You got anything you want to say before we get off here?
Derbies are the greatest sport on earth.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. We shall see you next week.
Have a good one, sir. See you guys.